Coming up on Network Africa. Mali interim government officially resigns as West African mediators visit the country to organize their release from military detention. Former President of South Africa, Jacob Zuma, pleads not guilty to corruption charges. Plus, Spanish charity says dead children washed up on Libya beach, some of who had tried to cross the Mediterranean to Europe, a dangerous route for migrants. Hello and welcome to the program, everyone. I'm Layo Adegoke. Mali's interim president Ba Undor and Prime Minister Moktar Wane are said to have officially resigned. Mr. Undor and Mr. Wane have been detained since Monday evening at a military camp outside the capital, Bamako. The officer who led last year's coup and became vice president of an interim government, Colonel Assimi Goita, accuses them of failing in their duties and seeking to sabotage the country's transition. Reports of their resignation comes as West African mediators visit the country hoping to organize their release from military detention. Led by former Nigerian President Goodluck Jonathan, the envoy is meeting with senior military figures who carried out the country's second coup in less than a year. The mediators hope to get the ousted president and prime minister released from military detention as soon as possible. Meanwhile, spokesperson for the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres says the United Nations multi-dimensional integrated stabilization mission in Mali is reiterating its strong condemnation of the arrest of President Ba Undor and Prime Minister Moktar Wane, as well as some of their other colleagues. Now, Stephane DUJARRIC stresses that this action has serious consequences for Mali and the region as a whole. MINUSMA is now seeking to gain access to those that have been detained as soon as possible and also to ascertain their conditions of their detention and also obtain guarantees of their fundamental rights and freedoms.
Colleagues in the UN peacekeeping mission there continue to monitor the latest developments and reiterate their strong condemnation of the arrests of President Ba Undor and Prime Minister Moktar Wane, as well as some other of their colleagues. This action has serious consequences for Mali and the region as a whole. Our colleagues are seeking to gain access to those detained as soon as possible, and to ascertain the condition of their detention and obtain guarantees of their fundamental rights and freedoms as enshrined in international human rights law. The Secretary General is continuing to follow the evolving situation very closely. He's being briefed on the latest development. Mr. Guterres continues to call for calm and for the immediate release of detained civilian leaders of the Malian transition. We're working closely with the Economic Commission of West African States, ECOWAS, and of course the African Union and all other international actors that are supporting the ongoing political transition in Mali.
South Africa's former president, Jacob Zuma, has pleaded not guilty to corruption charges at the start of his trial at a court in Pietermaritzburg. The 79-year-old pleaded not guilty to all 18 counts of racketeering, corruption, fraud, tax evasion, and money laundering. The charges relate to events more than 2 decades old in the early days of South African democracy and to a huge and deeply controversial arms deal. Mr. Zuma and his allies have always insisted the case is political, and he says he is the victim of a far wider conspiracy involving his enemies in the governing African National Congress and far beyond. Earlier in the day, crowds gathered outside the courthouse in support of Mr. Zuma.
Mr. Zuma, could I ask you to stand, please? You have followed the charges that have been put to you now from the indictment, am I correct?
Yes.
How do you plead to them?
I plead not guilty. We have learned to support every leader. We are just awaiting for the court. It's the court that will then tell us whether what happened is truth or not.
I believe in the president and his innocence, and we don't stand here because we're a cult or we are naive or we are brainwashed. We're here to support him, particularly me, first of all because he's from Uganda, and the president did a lot of things for us as black people.
Well, our South Africa Bureau Chief, Betty Dibia, joins us now for more on today's hearing. Hello, Betty. What has been the reaction to this guilty plea? I assume many South Africans are keen on seeing the outcome of this particular case against President Zuma, former president.
Former president, yes. Well, so people still call him the president. But as you've seen from the respondents that you had there, the division is there. You have people who are his die-hard supporters. Of course, he has a lot of grassroots support, going from how he grew up within the party as a person and even when he was in office. But you have those who are saying all that's going on now is just part of what they call the Zuma Stalingrad, where his efforts to branch out a case after case, bring case after case, to delay the trial from going on. But the state is saying we're going ahead with everything we're doing, and people are watching to see the outcome. But now, you know what started last Monday, when Mr. Billy Downer, that's the state council, said that he's been notified of the plea, that not the plea for the charges now, the plea regarding Section 106 1H, talking about the confidence in somebody, the prosecutor. That's what they're dealing with right now, not the trial. But the trial is still a long way ahead until this is out of the way.
All right, just talk us through today's hearing.
Well, his charges were read to him, and he pleaded, so did Talis, saying that they're not guilty as well. And Mr. Zuma, in his case, pleaded not guilty to all the charges, but he reserved his right to not disclose the basis of his defense. But then again, his defense team spent time reading out the reason for the plea on the issue of Section 106, which talks about, as I said earlier, the confidence in the prosecutor. That section, I think subsection 3 or 5, says that the counsel does not have the title to prosecute, and it refers to the issue of expecting a fair trial. So these are he gave details, and according to the judge, the trial judge, Pete Cohen, he said that case law in this section is very limited. So they're going to spend time really studying, and the state is also saying the volume of the documents that Mr. Zuma's team presented, they need time to really spend. I think the plea is about 141 pages. That's the document we were given on the plea that he presented in court today. So that's why the adjournment had to happen to the 19th of July. But there's a process before that, before we get, but the trial proper is still, stayed or stalled a little bit till this is out of the way. And Mr. Zuma is saying if he's successful in this plea, probably that he would want to be acquitted on all the charges.
All right, then I guess we have to wait till 19th of July. Thank you so much, Betty Dibia, our South Africa Bureau Chief.
Thank you.
The fourth ordinary session of the 5th Pan-African Parliament has begun in Johannesburg, South Africa, and is to take place for the next 2 weeks till the 4th of June 2021. The Parliament, which has been described as unique, will see a new leadership being ushered in as an election of the new members of the Bureau of the PAP will take place on the 31st of May 2021.
Fourth ordinary session of the 5th Pan-African Parliament converged to engage on the African Union AU's theme for 2021, Year of the Arts, Culture and Heritage, Levers for Building the Africa We Want. Present as the guest of honor at the opening ceremony was the President of the Republic of Ghana, His Excellency Nana AKUFO-ADDO, accompanied by South Africa's Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, Naledi Pandor, who gave the opening remarks.
As the Pan-African Parliament and as parliaments in our countries, we need to give more attention to what we are doing to invest in higher education. what we're doing to invest in intellectual capacity, what we're doing to build research and innovation institutions. Because if we cannot do that, then calling for Africa not to be dependent is merely to be rhetorical, to utter nice words, and not to change the fate of Africa.
Yes, we've now existed, this is the 16th year. We've been involved in several activities covering all sectors across the continent, outside the continent, but we still believe we've still a long way to get there.
With various challenges being faced by the continent, including the COVID-19 pandemic, economic and political progress, or the lack of it, the Pan-African Parliament will address these issues and discuss ways to tackle them, and also ensure that Africa unites and grows trade through the African Continental Free Trade Area and opening of borders.
It is the accelerated economic integration of committed nations on the continent that will breathe new life into the African Union and deliver the benefits of African integration to the doorsteps of the African peoples.
The first thing that needs to happen in the unity of the African continent is to do away with the borders and allow free movement of goods and persons. I shouldn't apply for visa to come to Nigeria. No Nigerian should apply for visa to come to South Africa. If you are applying for visa, then it means that we are not seeing each other as brothers and sisters. I mean, you don't need a visa to visit your own relatives.
Those things that divided us during the colonization process must never be allowed to play any role here in the parliament, Pan-African Parliament. Rather, what is expected of us is to be a united African Parliament, speaking with one voice and realizing the challenges facing Africa as at now, and doing whatever is humanly possible to give advice, necessary advice, to the head of states of the various African countries for reversing the situation.
This parliament includes the election of new executives and the welcoming of at least 100 new delegates from different countries on the continent.
Zimbabwe Human Rights NGO Forum's Executive Director Musa Kika has filed an urgent court application seeking to have the country's Chief Justice jailed for allegedly defying a court order. The High Court recently ordered Chief Justice Luke Malaba to step down, ruling that President Emmerson Mnangagwa's decision to extend his tenure by 5 years was illegal and unconstitutional, as the judge was 70-year-old. A recent constitutional amendment passed by Parliament raised the retirement age of senior judges from 70 to 75, but the High Court ruled any constitutional amendment needed to be put to a referendum. Mr. Malaba returned to work this week, according to local media, after the Justice Minister and Attorney General appealed the ruling. Now, Mr. Musa Kika has filed his urgent application, saying he wants Mr. Malaba jailed for 6 months, but says the sentence should be suspended if he ceases to work. The Somali government has said that federal and regional leaders have made progress on election talks and are set to sign an agreement on Thursday. Government spokesperson Mohamed Malemu said the outcome of the meeting was being finalized for the signing ceremony. The 4-day talks were chaired by Prime Minister Mohamed Hussein Roble. Now, the leaders have been meeting in the capital, Mogadishu, to resolve a protracted dispute over the electoral process, which led to violence last month. The president's term of office ended on the 8th of February, but President Mohamed remains in office because of a parliamentary resolution passed last year. Still ahead on Network Africa. The UN Humanitarian Chief, Mark Lowcock, calls on countries to apply laws to protect civilians from harm in armed conflicts. Please stay with us. Welcome back to the program. A top UN official in Somalia is warning of a dire humanitarian situation in the country, with 5.9 million Somalis, or more than 1/3 of the population, in need of humanitarian assistance. James Swan, the special representative of the UN Secretary General for Somalia, while addressing the UN Council, said Al-Shabaab remains a serious threat, manifesting their ability to plan and execute complex attacks on a range of targets across the country.
The security situation continues to be of grave concern. Al-Shabaab remains a serious threat, manifesting the ability to plan and execute complex attacks on a range of targets across Somalia. Recent incidents are outlined in greater detail in the latest report of the Secretary General. Suffice it to say that Al-Shabaab has demonstrated both initiative and resilience in recent months. The operations of the Somali security forces and AMISOM therefore remain crucial in maintaining the pressure on this group. Humanitarian situation is still dire, with 5.9 million Somalis, or more than 1/3 of the population, in need of humanitarian assistance this year. Of these, over 3 million are in acute need of life-saving assistance. While 80% of the country is impacted by drought conditions, heavy rains are at the same time causing seasonal flash flooding in some riverine areas. Erratic climatic shocks have led to greater displacement and increased food insecurity. Regrettably, only 19% of the humanitarian response plan for 2021 has so far been funded. This will not be enough to respond to the life-saving needs of Somalis across the country. I appeal to member states to make further contributions.
Kenya is receiving 72,000 of COVID-19 vaccines from the COVAX facility this week. The vaccines were redistributed from South Sudan after the country's health officials said they could not use the jabs before their expiry date. South Sudan received 132,000 AstraZeneca doses from COVAX in late March. The country's Undersecretary in the Ministry of Health, Mayen Machut, says they are not able to use all the doses because of delays by Parliament to approve the use of the vaccine. South Sudan will be left with 52,000 doses that it hopes to use before they expire on the 18th of July. In April, South Sudan said it was planning to get rid of 60,000 expired vaccines that came as a donation through the African Union. The Ugandan military court has released on bail 17 people detained 5 months ago while campaigning for presidential candidate Bobi Wine. The National Unity Platform NUP party members were arrested in December 2020 in the island district of Kalangala, a month before the election. They included members of Bobi Wine's media, security and protocol teams. They are also among 49 people arrested and subsequently charged with illegal possession of 4 rounds of ammunition. This was their third bail application. They were declined before on the grounds that they were potentially dangerous people capable of inciting violence. Spanish charity NGO Pro Activa Open Arms has shared images of dead children and women washing up on a beach in Libya. They received some of the photos from inside Libya and said they are of people who had tried to cross the Mediterranean to Europe, which is a dangerous route for migrants. They show the partially clothed bodies of some children and a woman bloated and half buried in the sand. At least 743 migrants are known to have died in the Mediterranean this year. All people are fleeing their homes in Rwanda's western town of Gisenyi as volcanic tremors continue. Now, the tremors follow Saturday's eruption of Mount Nyiragongo in neighboring Democratic Republic of Congo. The Rwandan seismic monitor reported earthquakes and tremors on Tuesday and also Wednesday morning. In the meantime, authorities have appealed for calm and say they are taking measures to assist people in danger zones after dozens of houses were destroyed. Schools, banks, markets and shops have all closed in Gisenyi. Some residents spent Tuesday night in the open out of fear that their houses might collapse. More people were seen on Wednesday at the town's main taxi park trying to leave towards the eastern region. The town's hospital has also moved its patients from its wards and other hospitals in western and northern Rwanda. The new head of the United Nations mission in South Sudan, Nicholas Haysom, has visited Bentiu and Malakal this week as part of his familiarization push to visit every part of the country and meet with the UN staff and local officials. So far, Haysom has traveled to 5 of the 10 UNMISS field offices. The special representative of the Secretary General stressed the need to visit these offices to see the issues facing staff and the conditions under which they live. His visit is of great advantage. That's according to Paul Ekibo, who's the head of the civil affairs and also the acting head of the UNMISS field office for Bentiu.
One of the advantages of his visit was to lay out clearly to local authorities the mandate of UNMISS, which was revised, as you know, in March this year. And so he told them exactly what our priorities were going to be and the areas we were looking at and what opportunities for collaboration existed and what support UNMISS may provide to local authorities and what we expect from the local authorities.
The UNMISS sections are very happy to see their new SRSG and happy to note that he's very concerned about all the issues that they brought before him. The Humanitarian Hub was also very encouraged by the collaboration and the fact that the SRSG spoke to them and also listened to their ideas and their issues. And I think most importantly, you've heard yourself from the governor. I think it's been an interesting discussion. It's been very useful, understanding how we can support within the remit of our mandate.
UN Humanitarian Chief Mark Lowcock is calling on all nations to apply laws and tools to protect civilians from harm in armed conflicts. According to Lowcock, accountability for violations must be systematic and universal because what is not punished is encouraged.
If war crimes go unpunished, things will get worse. Accountability for violations must be systematic and universal, because what is not punished is encouraged. That takes political will on the part of member states to investigate and prosecute allegations of serious violations whenever they occur. We have the laws and the tools to protect civilians from harm in armed conflicts. It's time that all states and parties to conflict apply them. Conflict causes acute hunger in direct and indirect ways. It displaces civilians from their agricultural land, their grazing areas, and their fishing grounds. In Nigeria last year, for example, at least 110 farmers were killed in an attack on a rice farm. In Ethiopia's Tigray region, people have been displaced, crops have been destroyed and looted, and food and other relief has been blocked.
5 years since the UN Security Council demanded an end to impunity for attacks on healthcare, our observation in 40 countries affected by conflict show that attacks on healthcare have gone unabated. Healthcare delivery continues to be impeded due to the disregard for international humanitarian law. We have also seen an increase in cyber attacks against healthcare facilities. Clearly, not enough is being done to protect healthcare workers and medical facilities to translate Resolution 2286 into action.
And that's it on the program for today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Layo Adegoke.